going to lead us. She is the police department chaplain and always gives us great blessings. Please come forward.
To our mayor, Honorable Brenda Gunter, to our St. Angelo City Council, and to all department heads and all in attendance, good morning and Happy New Year to you. Let's pray. Precious Father, in the name of Jesus, we come before your holy presence, seeking your counsel and favor over today's city council meeting. We ask that you please have mercy and incline thine ear and hear our prayer. We honor, worship, and praise your holy name. It is written in 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people which are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and forgive their sins and heal the land. Holy Father, forgive us of any sins that we may have in our lives, and let nothing hinder our prayers from being acceptable to you. I ask you to let the business that's about to be conducted today be done in a way that will glorify you and be edifying to all. We ask for your blessings over our mayor, Brenda Gunter, the St. Angelo City Council, and over every department head. Again, it is written, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. I also ask for a special blessing that you protect San Angelo from any active shooter in any other city, Lord. So thank you, Holy Father, for hearing us, and we pray that your will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Let your blessings rest upon everyone in attendance today. In the matchless holy name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
And today we have Callum Booker, who is the first grade in Wall, and he's going to help lead us in prayers today. You ready to go? I mean, I said it's hard to get back into the system. Do you want to do a prayer or a pledge? Oh. Okay. Let's stand here and put our hand over our heart.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
See, you wore my same color today. You knew we were going to get photographed. Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, gracious.
I know that we have a lot of school board members here in the audience today, so if you would come forward as we read this proclamation on the School Board Recognition Month. Carl and your group, would you like to come forward? Carl, come up here. You've been called to the front of the room by the mayor on top of it. The mission of public schools is to meet the diverse educational needs of all children and to empower them to become competent, productive contributors to a democratic society and an ever-changing world. Local school board members are committed to children and believe all children can be successful, lifelong learners, and that the best education is tailored to the individual needs of each child. Local school board members work closely with parents, educational professionals, and other community members to create the educational vision we want for our students. Local school board members are responsible for ensuring the structure that provides a solid foundation for our school system. Local school board members are strong advocates for public education and are responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectations to the district. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, declare our appreciation to the members of the San Angelo Independent School Board and proclaim the month of January 2020 as School Board Recognition Month in San Angelo, Texas, and urge all citizens to join us in recognizing the dedication and hard work of local school board members and in working with them to mold an educational system that meets the needs of both today's and tomorrow's children.
I was running, so I'll offer a few words. First, I'm Lanny Lehman. I want to recognize the rest of our board team. We have Amy Mizell Flint, Gerard Gallegos, who's our secretary, Max Parker, who's our vice president, and Bill Dindal, who's our treasurer, and a couple of our board members are not able to be here, Art Hernandez and Dr. Taylor Kingman, who's actually in surgery right now. So we appreciate this, Mayor Gunn, we appreciate council taking the time to recognize us. It's an honor and a privilege for us as a board team to work on behalf of over 14,000 students in San Angelo. We take that as a huge responsibility, and it really is great to work with a great board team. And we have a number of members of our administrative team out in the audience as well. I'd ask them to at least stand up and be recognized. So thank y'all so much. And thanks again for this recognition, Mayor. We appreciate it. Thanks, council.
Would anybody else like to offer some words today? You're good? Okay. Then let's go forward.
Everybody scoot back just a little bit.
Oh, I can't believe you.
Thank you for all you do.
Bless you.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
We will now move into public comment. Anyone who comes forward, please state your name and address or SMD. Each citizen can speak just once per item unless asked to comment by council. Public comment will be 3 minutes unless extended by council, and a proponent or opponent has 5 minutes unless extended by council. Council has no obligation to respond to comments or questions from the public. Any response from a member of the City Council to non-agenda comments is limited to a statement of specific factual information, recitation of existing policy, and directing staff to place a subject on a future agenda. I am going to ask Shirley Spears to come forward. There was a request for some proclamations that did not make it on the agenda, but I think it would be very good if you could come forward and read those at this point, Shirley. Or I can read them, but if you'll come forward and offer them, I think it would be great.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. I am Shirley Spears, President of the San Angelo NAACP, and with me is Dudra Butler, who is the Vice President of the San Angelo NAACP. We appreciate this time. We have a special guest that will be visiting with us on Friday. It is Ms. Sarah Collins, and so we requested this proclamation. I will read it in its entirety. The City of San Angelo and the San Angelo NAACP Unit 6219 are proud to host an evening of forgiveness with Sarah Collins Rudolph, the fifth little girl who survived the domestic terrorist attack at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama on September 15, 1963. We are honored because we understand the horrific personal impact the near-death experience had on Sarah Collins. We celebrate her courage to find forgiveness for those responsible for this tragedy. The City of San Angelo recognizes the local NAACP Unit 6219 and its leadership to bring this American treasure to our city, to remind us of the necessity to forgive and to help unite our city where there may be differences. Through diversity and inclusion, we could make a difference today and going forward. As we celebrate the life of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we pause to acknowledge his tireless efforts and messages of love and forgiveness throughout his leadership and now his legacy for the world to see. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas,
You're doing
on
great.
behalf of the City Council, proclaim Friday, January 10th, 2020 as Sarah Collins Rudolph, the Fifth Little Girl Day in San Angelo, Texas, and to urge all citizens to join us in recognizing and celebrating the impact forgiveness can have on our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shirley.
And it was
And
nice to
Dedra.
meet the mayor.
Do I have anyone in the audience who would like to come forward as well to offer public comment? Good morning.
Councilman, my name is Cheryl Salto. I've been a resident of San Angelo most of my life, except when I moved to Austin for about a 12-year period. I spent my life in nursing, but now I'm retired and disabled. But I speak out to the council to bring to their attention that our ban that we placed amongst tenting and the homelessness in our cities, we deemed illegal and prohibited camping within city public places. But this has now been brought before the Ninth Circuit Court and rejected, and has actually been ruled unconstitutional and against the Eighth Amendment Bill of Rights. And this was further backed December 16th by the U.S. Supreme Court, as they would not hear the case of Baker versus Idaho, Boise, Idaho. And while it served to move the eyesore, I suppose, of the city, it has done nothing to resolve this issue. And I have the fortunate, I don't want to call it a privilege, but understanding that I have loved ones out there on the street that I worry about every night and what's going to happen to them. They're alongside rivers and the brushes. They're alongside abandoned buildings. And even though I believe it was Salvation Army was our only option, that has not been an option for over a year. So in the process, our homelessness continues to grow. And I don't think one person has the answer, but I would just like to bring it before our attention on something that we as a city meet the needs of our homelessness before we're mandated to. Because I know as a general Christian society, we want to do what's right by people. We don't want to enable bad lifestyles, but we're not there to judge lifestyles either. And I just ask that we start some kind of solution to put people in homes and give them warmth and safety and security, which as of now, they have none. And to reverse the city council's decision to pass the city ordinance, which is in direct violation of the 9th District Court and is validated once again December the 16th of this year by the U.S. Supreme Court, as they would not hear the appeals to rescind the law as unconstitutional. So in that same precedence, our city ordinance that we placed a little over 2 years ago is now considered unconstitutional.
Thank you very much. Further public comment?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I wanted to provide y'all with two updates to two very different topics, but one being the sewer line issue with the sewer collapse at the Houston-Ard Expressway. I know that I had emailed you all an update, but just wanted to publicly let our citizens know that the sewer line has been repaired and that installation is complete. We will be working on the street repairs to the 2 access roads and hopefully restore those 2 access roads and the all the openings in that area fairly soon. The other thing is our new invoice cloud payment system. So on January 2nd, we launched the new online payment portal for utility bills. We've had a lot of customers go and sign up, but I just want to keep reminding those customers that did have an account with our old system that you do have to log in, create a new account, set up your new payment information. And if you were set up on bank drafts, you would also need to make sure to go in and register as an account. And always call our customer service at 657-4323 if a customer is having issues either setting up an account or just has questions about how they should proceed. So I just wanted to make the public aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? If not, we will close the section of the agenda for public comment, and we will move into the consent agenda. To start with, let me just say that we are pulling item J from the consent agenda. So with that, do we have, I'm going to start with Billy. Do you have any items, Billy, that you want to pull from the consent agenda?
No, I do not.
Okay. Lucy?
F and G.
F and G. Harry?
Item B, only because we've changed it since we put this, the original agenda out, and we have somebody in the city, in the council, in the chamber that wants to adjust it.
Tommy? Okay. With that, do I have an emotion to approve item A, B, C, D, E, H, and I? Billy, would you make that motion?
I think you said B in there, Mayor.
Not B.
B.
Oh, who's,
Harry pulled
B you did? Okay, sorry, hon. All right, so no B, as in boy. And now, Billy, would you like to make that motion?
Yes, I move that we accept the consent agenda with the exceptions of the items you listed.
Okay, and a second? Second. And a second by Lucy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 5-0. We will now start with item B. Consider authorizing the city manager to reject all bids received for RFB SB-01-20 street construction materials. Patrick, you're on.
Good morning. This bid is for our base material, hot mix, those items that we use amongst not only our street and bridge division, but throughout various divisions within the city for construction, earth and construction. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this item.
I think my question would be, probably from the public, is we put out one agenda item and then we changed it on Friday after the original agenda was posted. Is there a reason that we're now rejecting them?
Yes, sir. When we were reviewing the agenda item and going over it, we discovered that when we put out that specification in that bid, that all materials in the bid were specified to be delivered to the yard. So the respondents only gave pricing for a delivered materials price. The majority of our operations call for us to go pick up the material from their plant. So we didn't have any pricing for that material, for a material only pricing. The pricing that we got in response was for materials and delivery. So we needed to simply reject the bid in order to include both of those different pricing structures in the next bid. So that'll be going out here shortly, probably this week as a rebid.
Public to understand exactly why we're rejecting a bid. So
Would you like to make a motion to pass that then, Harry?
I move to approve as presented.
And is there a second? A second by Tommy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving item B, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, item B passes 5-0. We will go to item F, consider the Bradford Storm Recovery Project to address storm damage to residential structures funded through the COSA DC Affordable Housing Assistance Program. Bob, you're on.
Yes, Council. Well, basically, this is an administrative handoff. On September the 4th, Council approved the funds for Bradford using the Coastal DC funds, but we had to wait for 60 days for a comment period. So in November, when we were ready to start, turned out to be a little bit more efficient to move the funds into our account. That means the city's account, so my staff could take action. Back then, at the time, we assessed 3 new reconstructions and about 12, a dozen or so of major rehabs. Those needs are still there. So it's really, that's basically, we're waiting for the approval so we can start our projects.
Lucy, do you have a question?
No question. I just wanted it to be a reminder to the residents in the Bradford area. Thank you.
All right. Do I have a motion for approval then, Lucy?
I move to approve as presented.
A second by Tommy. And any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Then item G, consider resolution approving the fee schedule for animal services deceased animal pickup. Morgan, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. What's before you today is the resolution to actually put into law what was discussed and requested last council meeting. So on December 17th, there was the request to waive the fee or reduce the fee to $0 for the pickup of wildlife on private property. And so that is what is before you today in the resolution.
Morgan, what I wanted to ask you was, as far as domestic animals, are we talking about the residents that have their pets that pass away, or what are we talking about when you say that? That's
No,
going to
so
be
what we talked about
$25?
last time is, I guess certainly that could be an option. So domestic animals would be livestock, cats, dogs, pets. And so what we discussed last time was I very rarely get a call for someone, for me to pick up their own pet. It's generally an unowned animal. And so we talked about last time making that distinction between domestic and wildlife. And the feedback at that time was to still levy the fee for domestic animals, but to waive the fee for wildlife.
Right, so the $25 fee that will stay in effect, what is that about? What is the public going to know about that fee when
For
they
the
call?
pickup of domestic animals on private property.
So let's say that my dog goes over to, or a cat.
Dies in my yard.
Yeah, is in my yard and he dies, and I pick up the phone and go, hey, there's a cat in my yard and he's not mine. Can you come pick him up? Would I be charged $25?
Yes, that is what was directed at last meeting, but certainly if you wanted to make changes, you could make your motion in that way to make the fee just $0 for all deceased carcass pickup. I think it was Councilmember Thomas actually who said there's an expectation from the public that wildlife would be picked up at no charge when we asked for that clarification.
Right.
So,
And
but it's certainly this council's perspective to do whatever you feel is comfortable.
I'm just thinking about the people that are disabled or the elderly that do have a cat or whatever animal comes to their yard and they can't go out there and take care of it and they call you and they do not have $25 to pay. That's what I'm thinking about. That's where I'm going with this.
It's hard to make an ordinance that covers 100% of every situation that occurs in life, and I think I believe we've moved forward pretty aggressively and correctly to charge no $25 for any wildlife. How often do we get phone calls that would in fact apply, as Lucy has given the example?
For someone on a fixed income, it certainly is the minority.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
For citizens on a fixed income requesting this service, it certainly is a minority. Our software doesn't track calls for service in that way, so I couldn't speak to an exact number, but it's certainly few and far between. And we would advise when we do encounter those citizens and they are unable or don't wish to pay the fee, we say, well, who rolls your trash cans out for you weekly? Who mows your grass for you? Who's doing those kind of services for you? And in general, they have someone that is tending their business on their property and would take care of that as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
I'd like to
Harry?
make a comment. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a comment and say thank you to Animal Control because I know I've gotten several phone calls since we made the decision that we were going to go away from the zero fee for picking up the wildlife. And it's making a difference in San Angelo when we get these dead animals out of the street and off of people's properties. And I want to say thank you. And I know it takes staff time to do this, but the bottom line is in the long run, it's the right thing to do. So thank you.
Do I have any further questions from council? Do I have a motion to approve item G as presented?
So
I
moved.
move. Oh, second.
Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
With that, I believe we have concluded the consent agenda, and we will move on to the regular agenda. And comments regarding items on the regular agenda may be made by the public when each item is discussed as outlined above. Applicants, proponents, and appellants are expected from the time limit above, and instead must limit their remarks to less than 5 minutes. So we'll start with item A, public hearing and first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 9, Article 9.01, Parks and Lakes of the Code of Ordinances of the City of San Angelo. Carl?
Yes, good morning, Mayor and City Council. I'm starting to feel like an old-timer because I've been here almost 20 years, and Shane Kelton, another old-timer, and I have been working towards a revision of Chapter 9 for at least 15 years, and it kind of feels like a dream to reach this point where we actually bring it to City Council for consideration. Working
when
with,
you say things like that, you leave yourself wide open for.
I'm a target. Go ahead. We worked with two previous. We worked with two previous city attorneys to try to make some progress on it, and working with our current city attorney, Teresa James, who took it to heart to work on this revision, as she does everything she takes to heart, and she working with us, operations, the police department, and water utilities, we got it done. So we're bringing it to you for consideration. So first of all, if I could just present everything, if you have any questions, I'll address them. This proposed ordinance first provides updates to ordinances mostly written in 1959. There was a significant reduction in the number of pages of the related ordinances, and it combines 3 sections, general, parks, and Lake Nasworthy, into one. It removes redundancies, improves efficiency of language, provides for general updates, and again, has been reviewed by the city attorney, police department, operations, water utilities, and parks and recreation. Some of the key provisions: it moves the supervision of the lake patrol from public works and provides it under the police department. Deletes provisions that are duplicated in state law or the code of ordinances, including provisions related to traffic control, animals, sewage disposal, garbage collection, junk vehicles, nuisance, and abatement. Removes references to non-existent lake board and delegates those authorities as appropriate. These duties include the removal of fixed and floating structures at the lake, approval of livestock and fowl, and designation of camping areas. Expands restricted areas around the lake and adds a general category of any area marked as authorized personnel only.
You want to stop here for a minute, Carl. When it says expands restricted areas, talk to us about that.
It includes areas where we don't want public access to gates, dams, access to the gates for the dams. That's what it's talking about.
It has not been previously in the legal documents that says these areas are restricted areas?
There were some restricted areas. The 4 that we've included in this ordinance are the entire length of the earthen embankment and road on the top of Lake Nasworthy Dam, which I believe was always restricted. The Lake Nasworthy gates beyond the buoys, which is a new one, I believe. and then the Lake Nasworthy outlet works. And then we added that general any area marked as authorized personnel only. In recent years, across the country, cities and governments have been protecting the infrastructure of lakes and dams from security threats. And so we wanted to have pretty general authority to do that when that's necessary. And that's also why we added the Lake Nasworthy gates beyond the buoys. We were letting people very, very close to that structure and with access that you really don't see at any other lake.
And they will have appropriate signage?
Allison can probably speak better to what that plan is, but yes.
Yes, we will coordinate with PD and make sure that we have the appropriate the signage to make sure that it's enforceable and that those areas are clearly marked restricted.
And what happens in a restricted area if somebody does go beyond and enters that restricted area? So what do the police do? What is it? Is it a fine? Is it a slap on the hand? Is it don't do that again?
Barry Wyke, he's one of our Lake Patrol officers.
If someone is found in the restricted area,
You want to go ahead and announce?
Barry Wyke.
Okay, thank you.
With the police department. If someone is found in a restricted area, they're currently issued a citation, and it's not a jailable offense. We do already have places that have signage up, and we have been enforcing that for some time.
We have been enforcing. Yes.
The current restricted areas, yes.
So once they get the first citation, what happens? And they're caught again doing it?
They'll receive another citation.
And then the third time?
They'll receive another citation.
And the fourth time?
Another citation.
So the citation has no behind it?
If municipal court, if there are fines, there are other offenses where there are second and third offenses, the fines go up, and I don't know what the fines
The fines are the part that one would have to deal with?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have, well, he is up here. Do I have questions from anybody else? Okay, thank you so much. Carl? Oh, yes,
Question
Billy.
for Carl.
Yeah,
or
I'm having
maybe
him
it's
come back
Allison.
up. Yeah. Go ahead. Billy, go ahead.
Carl, on that restricted area, does that include not just, you know, trying to deter people who shouldn't be in those areas, but protect people from potential accidents? Are those areas that are accident prone that, you know, we don't want anybody to go in there because they may slip and fall and that sort of thing?
Some of these, specifically the outlet works of the Nasworthy Dam, in the event releases were made, obviously we don't want people down there while we release water from the gate works and those type of things. So if that answers your question, we do want to keep people out of those areas for safety reasons.
Good, because I was listening to something on the news recently, and someone was suing for millions of dollars because they said a path was not clearly marked, you know, do not enter, that sort of thing. So I'm happy to hear that we're going to have signage to keep people, you know, safe from themselves.
Thank you. All right, Carl, continue. I think you were on the defines director when I interrupted you and asked you to go back to the restricted areas, so go ahead and continue.
The director in the revised ordinances is defined as to be the director of Parks and Recreation unless otherwise stated. It defines overnight to be between the hours of 10:30 p.m. and 6 a.m. It removes provisions providing for a reward for information related to defacement of property.
You know what, excuse me, but go back, please.
Go back.
Okay, on the defines overnight, so what happens if, let's say, some homeless people or just some other people are found camping overnight there?
It could become a civil issue. Maybe you could stay close to the front.
Mayor, you're talking about in a restricted area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't
Any area.
define it that way. It just says defines overnight. So the question mark is, what does overnight mean? In what areas or not what areas? What does that apply to?
As I recall, overnight was in there, we just defined it to be between those hours.
But what is overnight? Is that the entire area? Is it in the restricted area? What is it? What's the area we're patrolling for overnight?
Why is it even mentioned, in other words?
Yeah.
Right. It's any park property, but the main concern was to have it for where the camping areas are. Is that correct?
The paid camping areas, the two parks, were the only two places you can legally camp overnight. You have to have an overnight camping permit. And you can use a day use permit. Once it reaches the overnight hours, that's when the overnight camping permit is required. So people who only have a day permit who are in the park during the overnight hours are in violation of that.
And this is in the park areas that allow for day or night parking passes. So
Yes, in Spring Creek and Middle Concho parks, the paid parks, there's two uses. There's a day use and a overnight.
okay, so anywhere else around the lake? Yes, Teresa.
I'd like to, maybe this will help clarify, based on the comment that we had during the public comment period, the ordinance referenced in that comment is a separate section of Chapter 9 that deals with camping on any public property. Right now, that ordinance is suspended because the Salvation Army is closed and there's not enough overnight housing for folks. But the camping that we're talking about here are only like the designated camping areas and places where you're not allowed to stay around the lake, the parking of vehicles, leaving stuff overnight. It's a variety of different situations where overnight is used. We don't want people just leaving their tents up and then coming back the next day, so it's addressed in that situation as well. But the general camping on public property, that's a different section of the code that we're not dealing with today.
Okay, Billy, go ahead.
But I think when Carl started off, he said general, and then parks, and then Lake Nasworthy. So parks, would that include all parks throughout the city? Or what? So if we're saying overnight hours, 10:30 to 6 a.m., in any parks throughout the city, do we really enforce that? And that may be a question for Carl, because you're Lake Patrol, right? Are you all the parks?
I am specifically Lake Patrol, but in this section, it defines overnight, and I think originally when we were writing it, we were considering the camping on public property as well, but it just defines overnight. So as far as Lake Nasworthy goes, the overnight provision here that we're referring to has to do with the camping portion. You can go to the lake 24 hours a day. You can go to certain places on the lake. You just cannot be in those camping areas in the overnight hours without an overnight permit.
And so who checks that?
The Lake Patrol.
So you go around and knock on doors or knock on tents?
No, they have, and
Just saying.
they have permits that are supposed to be displayed, which is covered in the ordinance, and how they're displayed. And so we just go by, and if we don't see a permit, then yes, we knock on campers, knock on tents.
So just for clarification, so I'm sure I understand, when we talk overnight, we're strictly talking about at the lake? Because, okay, well, that's kind of where I was going. For instance, if we have someone at Kirby Park that's there at midnight,
Right.
do we patrol that and make sure that?
That's my issue too, Billy, is where does this apply?
Right,
Because we're talking
exactly.
about parks.
Parks, exactly.
The hours were added to clarify, to help the Lake Patrol regarding the camping. But the provision for sleeping overnight had been there and remains in there in the ordinance.
So at no park are
Correct.
they allowed to stay overnight or camp at any of the parks except if they have a permit at Lake Nasworthy that allows them to stay overnight?
That's
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So no staying overnight, putting up a tent or a sleeping bag is allowed in any of the parks?
Right. That's correct. And that restricting the hours does help us, because if somebody's napping in the park, that's not illegal. But if they stay overnight, then it becomes illegal. In terms of enforcement, it becomes a civil issue. If somebody reports it, then the police can come into play.
I can tell you, I mean, I just did a word search on the word overnight in this draft of the ordinance, and there's only 10 instances of it. The first one is leaving in a park any movable structure overnight or special vehicle. The area needed, occupied, or used by recreational vehicle or a group of individuals for overnight accommodations, a meeting place or building or fire, parking of a meal, and or camping. The director or designee shall have the authority to designate overnight camping sites and to mark sites. Camping overnight in other than designated areas is prohibited, and that's at the lake. An overnight camping permit must be purchased each day that each overnight campsite is occupied. Each vehicle present in a camping area after 10:30 p.m. shall have an overnight camping permit, and then vehicles are prohibited from parking within an overnight campsite without a valid permit.
So it seems like we would have to define
Lake Nasworthy
the
from
camping area or designate that, because otherwise, if I just read that, it looks like after 10:30 p.m., I should not be in a park.
Well, the ordinance, this is just a summary. The ordinance does designate that. The ordinance designates specific places at the lake where overnight camping is allowed.
Not just at the lake, Teresa, just any park
all
in
parks.
the city of San Angelo.
Well, in any other park, overnight camping, that's where that other ordinance that we're not dealing with comes into play.
and it exists today.
It exists today.
Controls all parks.
Yes, all public property. It controls the sidewalk outside of this building. So yes, I mean, that's addressed in a different ordinance. This one really is dealing primarily with Lake Nasworthy, mostly, and then some general kind of requirements that go on in our parks. So if you look at the ordinance itself, the general provisions are things like the definitions, that there's going to be a penalty, that we're going to charge facility fees, that what the director is responsible for, you can't injure property, and that you can't have glass containers in our parks. And then deals with traffic and bicycles, reservation of facilities, and fire prevention. The actual parks provision kind of defines certain areas, the first being recreational areas and what the rules are for those, prohibited sales and advertising and signage, and then the exception to that in our parks, skating facilities, the designated dog parks, and then the Lake Nasworthy are all the rules that apply to the lake, because that is a special kind of like public facility that we have out there. So,
Well, it becomes confusing because, you know, on the agenda, it specifically says parks and lakes.
Right.
So as we talk through these things, because it says parks, one has to understand if we're just talking about the park at the lake or the parks in the city.
right, and I think the ordinance spells that out pretty specifically, the ordinance document itself. It differentiates what the rules are in each of those areas.
Billy, do you have a further question on that definition?
Well, it seems like Chapter 9, with the summary here, includes parks. So if we have more specific areas somewhere, it just seems like it might get fuddled up. That, you know, how would you point to Chapter 9 and say overnight hours 10:30 to 6, and then somewhere else, City Park says 11 to 6?
So we
How would you
clarified that in this. so that-
differentiate between
Yeah.
those?
Well, in Chapter 9 is not the parks ordinance, it's really a public places ordinance. Chapter 9 has multiple articles. We're really just dealing with Article 9.05, and then 06 and 07, I think, that in the old ordinance.
So you are dealing with all of Chapter 9?
We're just dealing with one article that deals with the Parks Board and the lake and generally what happens in the rules. The other sections are general provisions for the whole ordinance. The parks, like Nasworthy, are the two that we're dealing with. Municipal airport's another one, and then that camping on municipal facility or public property. So we're not dealing with those two. We're just dealing with Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 today.
So let me then clarify for me, we have Division 2 in our background, which is parks. That, I assume, is all parks. So you just included the entire
Yes, park system.
park system in this background information, which then is a bit confusing, and if we're only talking, as you were just delineating there, Teresa, a smaller section. So
Actually, we're like reducing the confusion. When you look at the Code of Ordinances right now, it talks about general provisions. And in that general provisions, those are mostly dealing with the park system. But the way that it's written, it deals with the entire Chapter 9. So those general provisions now currently would apply at the municipal airport. So to make that more clear, we combined everything dealing with the parks, which is Article 1, the general provisions, which you'll find here, Article 2, the actual parks dealing with recreation areas and playgrounds, and then the Lake Nasworthy provisions into one article. So that's now going to be the Article 9.01, and we set aside 902 and 903. We reserve those, and I have a plan for those later, but we reserve those for now. So now everything that deals with parks is going to be in Article 9.01. Everything that deals with airport is going to be in Article 9.04, and the specific subset of camping, which is anywhere on public property, is going to be in Article 9.05, is how the new ordinance is going to look. So Chapter 9 is a very broad ordinance that deals with public property in general. We're dealing with the subset of recreational parks.
Right. Harry, did you have a question?
I was just going to offer, from my perspective, we're just looking to define overnight with those particular hours. This is not a major change. It just defines what overnight means, because obviously overnight is the word that was used, and this just clarifies what those hours are for overnight.
Overnight is a word we're discussing, but it applies to all the conversations we're challenging and asking for information on because of the definition of parks. And parks is what it says on this, not just the lake. So when you say parks and not just the lake, we're going to ask questions about how does it apply to the parks, not just the lake and not just to camping at the lake. Tommy, did you have another question or comment?
Now, this is so nitpicky. Somebody's going to have to slap me here, but on item number 6, when we're under Division 2 of parks and then recreational areas, and we go to number 6, it talks about the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Is that something that just was missed? Should that be 10:30 to 6? That is awfully nitpicky, but...
Yes, but if we're approving it, it's approved as we approve it.
agree.
And so if this document says 11 and you're saying it's 10:30, what is it?
I think that overnight is defined because our police department needs to be able, when they're writing a citation saying you can't leave your stuff there overnight, they could say sunset to sunrise, but that's hard to prove up in court. To say you can't leave a tent on the ground when you're not there from this hour to this hour is very easy. We also made more specific and more rules for specific areas. So playgrounds, for instance, you can't be in a playground from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's not in conflict with the overnight provisions because it's more specific than the overnight provisions. So when it says
Playground
overnight,
1 gives you an extra 30 minutes.
yes. And maybe we want to make it all overnight, maybe we
I
don't.
think it gets a little complicated to have 1 hour for this and another hour for that, and it would seem to me that it might be nitpicking, but once it goes into effect, then the nitpicking starts to happen. And so that makes a big difference in terms of patrolling and controlling. So the issue is, if overnight is defined from 10:30, I would assume it applies to all areas inclusive of playgrounds.
Well, I think that it applies to every place that says overnight within the ordinance. And
Yeah,
playgrounds does not say overnight, playground says 11 to 6.
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
we can change that to overnight if that's the preference, if you guys want that kind of consistency. But I think from what we've seen and heard from Lake Patrol, that having actual specific hours listed for playgrounds and actual specific hours of what constitutes overnight makes it easier for them to figure out if a rule is being violated.
Are there further questions concerning the hour? Okay, next.
It removes the provisions providing for a reward for information related to defacement of property. Modifies the provisions specific.
Wait a minute, removes information, reward provisions, what is that?
There was a provision in the Code of Ordinances that said that anybody who provides information about the defacement of public property in a park, there's a $50 reward for that. That's not a necessary provision. We can do rewards through Crime Stoppers and other ways. It's not necessary to codify it, nor is it necessary to set it at a specific amount, because based on what has occurred, we might want it to be more than $50.
And
It's just an unnecessary provision.
Okay, and it is $50 today, or we're just adding the new $50 issue?
We're removing the reward from the ordinance and leaving it to be done as we normally do reward situations.
Okay, question on that, anybody? All right, next.
Modifies the provisions specific to food trucks and incorporates those provisions in the general sale of merchandise section, providing that sales can take place in areas designated by the director. As you recall, we had created a new ordinance related to food trucks. Gives the Director of Parks and Recreation limited variance authority related to public special events with requirements that the variances be in writing and a copy provided to SAPD. Those include the placement of signage related to the event, parking on grass or other prohibited areas related to the event, leaving movable structures or special vehicles overnight outside of designated camping areas related to the event. Does not include the noise ordinance. Those would still have to come to City Council, and any other request for a variance from an ordinance related to that event.
So are we saying that on, for example, the parking on grass, which we get a lot of people coming forward and asking for that variance, are we saying now that we're going to give you the authority to approve parking on grass without having to come to City Council?
Correct, with the concurrence of the SAPD.
And what other item are we giving you authority over?
Placement of signage related to the events and placement of special vehicles overnight or movable structures that's related to the event.
It simplifies it for people.
Yes.
That's great.
Dunking booth or whatever.
Yeah, it's good.
Removes references to Twin Buttes properties since they are not within the city limits and are now managed under the TPWD Public Hunting Lands Program. And
Yes, Billy?
Now, who manages the Twin Buttes properties, Carl?
it's owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. We're in agreement, the city's in agreement with them to manage those properties. Since 2016, we went into a three-way agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation, TPWD, and the city. The TPWD placed the overlay of the Texas Public Hunting Lands Program onto that, and so the game wardens are actively managing those properties through that program for hunting, fishing, recreational use, and can enforce all the state laws that apply.
Texas Parks and Wildlife
Yeah,
Department.
the TW.
Texas Parks and Wildlife
That
Department.
It's easy for you to say.
Exactly.
The other issue with Twin Buttes is it's outside of our city limits, so our police department doesn't have jurisdiction out there anyway. So we had a bunch of rules, and we technically, for a long time, were enforcing laws outside of their jurisdictional authority. So since Parks and Wildlife took it over, we just removed it from this ordinance.
So we have no responsibility
No, ma'am.
at Twin Buttes to keep it clean or
Still,
anything
man,
like
we still
that?
lease the
Alice,
property.
Allison has some responsibilities out there because of it's a water source. Shane? Oh, come Shane. Shane.
Whoever, who has the information, come forward, please.
He's coming up here. We oversee it for recreational use, and I brought to City Council a request to apply for a grant for some trail work out there so we can mark the trails, working with the Bureau. They just have finished their transportation management plan, which makes official the access routes out there and the ATV motorcycle course out there. And if we get the grant, then we can mark those trails and provide information signs out there for them.
Through our agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation, we are still responsible for any illegal dumping, trash pickup, things like that out there. Certain areas that we're responsible for mowing and maintaining. Still responsible for all the maintenance and all the maintenance activities of the dam in the dam area. All the fences, we're responsible for maintaining all the fences. Any work like that or anything that's required by the Bureau for the management of that property, especially the dam, we're still required to perform those duties.
Thank you.
Further questions? All right, Carl, continue.
Really the end. There's also some non-substantial editing and clarifications.
What is that? I mean, that's like, give me the world
Like
here. Yeah, I'm on. Yeah.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah.
Teresa?
I don't know. Carl made up that statement.
I mean, that's pretty broad right there.
Well, I think what he means is that we did some renumbering and those sorts of things and added some of these definitions to make things like overnight more clear.
Non-substantial is the key word.
Define substantial.
Non-substantial, not that important.
Okay, do we have any other questions for Carl on this item A? If not, then do I have a motion to approve item A, the public hearing and first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 9, Article 9.01?
So moved.
So moved by Harry. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Tommy. Do I have public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 5-0. We will move on to item B, consider ratifying a resolution by COSA DC awarding RFBDC-01-20 for infrastructure improvements, phases 2.1 and 2.2 of the San Angelo Business and Industrial Park to Reese Albert Incorporated, authorizing the board president to negotiate and execute a construction services contract with Reese Albert Incorporated in a sum not to exceed $3,354,682.70, a project authorized under Chapter 501 of the Development Corporation Act for infrastructure improvements necessary for development of a portion of the San Angelo Business and Industrial Park, subject to approval of the City Council. Mr. Schneeman, you're on.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Council, Mr. Valenzuela. I'm Bob Schneeman with the City's Economic Development Department. This is a project that I, for one, am glad to see finally come to fruition. Council may remember that about 2 years ago now, we sold 52 acres of land to AEP to build a new facility on this property right here. As a part of that, we had to extend public improvements that were outside of a previously identified project. So we extended this street, which is Gateway Drive, and also all the utility improvements to go along with that. We're now coming back and finishing phase 2.1, which, and I'm sorry, it was, this is the area that we did. We're now coming back and finishing phase 2.1, which is the drainage area you see there in green, and also extending into phase 2.2, which is identified in blue. Under this contract, we had several milestones. We went out to bid November 19th of 2019. We issued an addendum on the 3rd of December, had a pre-bid meeting on the 4th of December. As a result of that, issued an additional addendum on the 9th of December and had bid openings on the 13th of December. We had 2 respondents to the request for bids, Reese Albert Incorporated and Salinas Construction Technologies, LLC. Excuse me. We had the bids divided into two phases, 2.1 and 2.2, because Council may also recall that we have a $1.25 million Economic Development Administration grant that only applies to phase 2.2. And that was due to the fact that we had to pull some of that work out for AEP, like I explained previously, and the Economic Development Administration would not fund a portion of that because it was out of sequence with the rest of the project. So Reese Albert's bid for the remainder of 2.1 came in at $1.1 million. Their bid for phase 2 in its entirety, 2.2 in its entirety, is $2.2 million for a total bid of $3.35 million. Salinas Construction Technologies.
May I just ask a question real
Yes,
quick?
ma'am.
On the total bid of the 3.354, is, so then we get the grant for 1.2 million?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, and I've
That
got a slide
redu-
that'll
yeah,
cover that
okay,
here in a minute.
fine, thank you.
Salinas Construction had their 2.1 bid was 2.7 million, and their phase 2.2 bid was 4.3 million for a total bid of 7.05 million. It's a pretty significant difference. We are recommending that we go with Reese Albert. Budget considerations. We had $2 million originally budgeted back, and we started this back about 4 or 5 years ago. We allocated some money saying we know we're gonna extend phase 2. So let's commit some funds, and we've been holding those funds ever since. The $588,846 shown there comes out of that $2 million. That was for the phase 2.1 associated with the AEP project. Of course, phase 2.1 and 2.2 infrastructure, according to the Reese Albert bid, is $3.35 million, and then we subtract from all of that the $1.25 million that we were receiving under the EDA grant. We've added a 5% contingency to this for $167,000, which means we will be looking at a budget amendment of $861,000 down the road as we proceed with the project.
That additional budget required, what does that $861,000 additional dollar impact another project because of the additional dollars required?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
You're saying that it's $860-some thousand additional funds required. And my point is the following: if COSA DC has X amount of money only, and now we need another $861,000, does that $861,000 impact anything else in the COSA DC world that might come up that needs the money?
I'll let the expert answer that.
Well, I can't speak as to what other projects they have coming down the line, but we do have several projects that are fairly large dollar amounts that we are monitoring the cash flow on a very regular basis, and we meet with the Development Corporation every month to discuss that. This amount that we are requesting for the next budget amendment, I believe we'll have available already in their future projects account, so it'll just come from that line into another line and not impact their fund balance.
Okay. Do I have questions from council? All right, then do I have a motion to approve awarding the bid to Reese Albert for $3,354,682.70?
So moved.
So moved by Tommy, seconded by Harry. Do we have public comment? No public comment. We'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
We'll move on to item C, second reading of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2020 for capital items, donations, grants, and projects. Tina?
Thank you, Mayor. Tina Deersky, Director of Finance. Good morning.
Morning.
This is the long-awaited budget amendment for the Bradford project for storm recovery. I do want to point out that there's a typo here. It should be 638,861. So when you make the motion, if you could please include that slight change. That is the amount that was approved by the Development Corporation's board as well as is budgeted in their fund. So $638,861.
Lucy, would you like to make that motion?
Yes, I move to approve as presented.
The $638,861?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
there a second?
Second.
Second by Harry. Is there public comment? No public comment. We'll take a vote on the Bradford storm recovery. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item D, consider awarding RFP NFS-01-20, Bradford Storm Recovery Housing Reconstruction. Amazing. Yeah. Reconstruction project to Galilee CDC in the amount of $121,602 budget for purchase in fiscal year 2020 and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. So is the $121,000 out of the $638,000?
Yes, it is.
So I know, it's just interesting, it's two different line items on the agenda instead of one, but that's all right. It is what it is. So, any questions for Bob on the 121,602 for Galilee CDC?
I just wanted to ask, Bob, on this 121, how many homes or how many people will you be able to help with that amount? Or how?
Well, this is actually a RFP for one construction, reconstruction of one of the units that we knocked down.
Okay.
We have 2 more coming for a complete reconstruction. Then we have another 12 that will be rehabilitated. Right now, we have 7 bids ready to go for the rehabilitation. So you kind of have to split. There's two different concepts. One's reconstruction, complete reconstruction, and the other is just basic rehab. Like I said, we have about 7 so far. We're going to reach about 10 to 12 rehabs and then 3 reconstructions. This is the first of the 3.
When we reconstruct these homes and do the things that you just said are in the lineup to do we require that they then have insurance to cover any future damage to that house? Because I know a lot of these homes that we're talking about are due to many people not having insurance at all.
There is no direct requirement to continue insurance. That's correct. We do not. It's not part of the requirements. We do put a lien, of course. We do always a deferred loan, so we do have that mechanism to get our money back if something happens. But no, we do not require them to have insurance.
You have other participants in terms of dollars that are coming to the program, because we couldn't do all you've just described with all those homes for $600,000, could we?
No, we do it on the cheap, I guess. We have nonprofits that help us.
Yeah.
We're working with other organizations to help us. So it's a collaborative effort to get to where we need to be.
I have a question.
Yes,
ma'am.
Billy, please.
Bob, you have two programs where you work with the targeted neighborhoods for rehabs, that sort of thing. So are we using any of that money for the Bradford storm recovery?
We are not. This is a whole separate program. This goes to DC. That's their money, not ours. We're just executing the program for them. We do have our own, the Blitz. We are going to do in that area, and we've already been advertising. In fact, we had 5 homeowners respond to us, so we're going to combine the Bradford area into our Blitz this year.
If someone is not in the Bradford area but has substantial damage to their home, are they considered in this program?
If funds available, but I don't think there's going to be any funds available. So basically, in reality, no, we won't have any funds available for that. All the funds are pretty much all earmarked for the Bradford area. The Blitz is strictly also for a specific area. This is the Bradford again. So no, we won't visit. We do have an emergency repair that we can help with sewer lines and electrical problems and those kind of things.
But nothing for flooding?
No, that's correct.
Lucy?
I just want to ask, Bob, when is the Blitz project?
It's always, we start now, and we usually have it at the last Saturday of April.
Of April?
Of April, yeah. I believe it's the 26th. I'm not sure, but it's the last Saturday.
Would you explain the way that this works for the public? So if we build a new home and someone sells that home within a year after it's completed, what happens?
You get that money back.
You get the money back?
Yes, exactly right. We get all the money back, yes. And then we can reinvest that money into other projects.
Do I have further questions?
I was just going to move to approve as presented.
Okay, a motion, a second by Tommy. Public comment? No public comment, we'll take a vote.
Mayor Steve Hampton, still here. I thought that was a very good comment you brought up about no insurance. How about labor? Do they have to contribute labor like some of the housing projects that we're aware of? Do they have to contribute any labor to the cause?
I don't have the answer, Bob. If you want to come forward and answer that question.
It depends what program. Some programs do require that. For example, Galilee's does require a portion of some activity by the homeowners. Rehabs do not, neither do emergency repairs. Those are strictly handled by contractors.
There's a motion, a second. We've had public comment. With no more further public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Item E, first public hearing and introduction of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019, and ending September 30th, 2020 for capital items, grants, and projects. Tina?
Thank you, Mayor. This is our second budget amendment this fiscal year. In this budget amendment, we are requesting to budget revenue for an FAA grant, grant number 39, again from the Federal Aviation Administration, as well as some PFC revenue, and then, of course, a corresponding expenditure. I will mention that we have asked the directors that are involved with these projects to be here and to be available for questions if you have project-related questions.
We'd like to know what the project is.
Sure. I'll ask Jeremy to come
Yes,
up.
I see him. I see him coming forward.
Mayor,
Good morning.
council staff. Jeremy Valgaardson representing the airport today. This is the Grant 39. It's the project we actually had to pull the bids. If you remember, it was for the runway rehabilitation project and the ramp rehabilitation project.
And so, because we had to put it back out again, so we haven't reassigned this project to someone through the RFP project process?
That's correct. We're hoping to post the project again this month. We do have the grant in hand. The FAA said they would not pull the grant, so this is a firm number.
So that won't impact it?
Correct.
Okay, do I have further questions from council? With none, do I have a motion to approve this budget amendment?
I think she's got more.
Well, we could do one at a time, or we could do them all.
Whatever your pleasure.
You're up there, go ahead.
Okay. The next one is also for the airport. It is to budget, as Jeremy just mentioned, for the Department of Transportation ramp grant to do some maintenance and that type of work out at the airport. And this third one is for airport machinery. He is requesting to use some fund balance money to purchase 2 tractors and 2 cutters for replacement out at the airport.
Define a tracker and a cutter.
Thank you, Mayor. We're actually looking to just get 1 tractor. We didn't have enough money for 2. We need 3, but we're going to start with
Tractor.
what can we afford, a tractor.
I thought you were a tracker.
No, a tractor. A tractor and a cutter.
I got it. I know what one of those are. I'm a farm girl, okay?
Well, we need a tractor.
I'm like, what does a tracker do out there?
And we're just looking to improve the appeal and the looks of the airport, both airside and landside. Airside is what we call our side of the fence. Landside is the side the public can see. And a big 20-foot cutter with all the mesquites we have out there would really do some good.
Thank you. Tina?
Sure of a tractor?
I'm like, tracker, and I'm like, what is that?
Try to enunciate more
Mayor
clearly.
needs some help.
Okay, next we're budgeting for a grant from the Bureau of Reclamation for a new dock at the main ramp in Twin Buttes. Parks grant revenue of $35,000 with a local match of $15,000, again for Twin Buttes dock.
It gets confusing when we say Twin Buttes is outside of the city limit, and yet we are applying for these grants from the city. Which is confusing. Just saying. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sure everyone in the audience is as confused as I am, but I'm going to go with the flow here.
Okay, the next amendment is also for a parks grant in the amount of $137,000 with a match of $91,500. That's going to be using the riverbank stabilization funds that you set aside for this fiscal year to leverage with some additional grant revenue. And that's for the North Concho Riverbank Stabilization
So
Project.
the money that we have will take care of all of the high damage and some of the moderate damage river stabilization that needs to be done?
It will not take care of all of it. This is, as council asked us to do, is to try and leverage grant dollars to maximize the dollars you set aside for bank stabilization. So we currently have 1 bid that's, you'll see that, I think, at the next council meeting, where we're have a contractor and a design, so they'll do some bank stabilization over near the park's headquarters. This area focuses on an area near downtown, starting at the Johnson Dam and moving back, and so we'll start there because that's where this is specifically for. And then if we have other dollars, we'll continue on. As I think several of you have seen the map, there's several areas along the river headed back toward the sports complex. From
There were
downtown.
3, I think, maybe 4 that were considered high priority,
Yeah.
pretty bad situations, so this
The-
money will cover 1.
The first ones are back toward the Parks Department, and those are under contract. You'll see that award coming at the next council meeting. This is specifically in that area that starts there, and there's some there, and then there's some farther back toward the convention center way. So this will cover that area, and then you allocated additional dollars outside of this that we will start working on. So Al has that bid coming next time. He'll be preparing those next spots, which will come back to you again with, we'll have to bid those out to get a contractor to give us a price on it, since you allocated additional money this past year, at the end of the year.
Yeah, I just want to make sure those high priority ones, because they were bad. I want to make sure.
Those will be coming to you, and
there's-
we'll get as far as those funds will let us go. Since his current bid came in, he'll be a little better able to tell how far it will take us.
Because on the line items of the medium stabilization projects, there was a huge one for $60,000, which I would assume if we get any rain, some of those that are on the medium list would move up into a high priority list. And I want to make sure we're ahead of the game on that so that we don't wake up with some of the really bad ones we have now.
In some areas, as you see those come to you, we'll have to decide, if there's 2 spots that are fairly close together, do we just do them, or do we just go ahead and do that bank all the way between them? So we'll be making those decisions, but this is an ongoing item that will require attention, as you've done the last 2 years, in the next few years to get it where we need it.
Correct. Thank you. All right.
Next up is to budget for facility improvements for the Civic Events Fund, that $100,000 that Sid brought to you, I believe, at the last meeting to
Right.
request the use of the fund balance for that, for those projects that he brought forward. And finally, we are budgeting for a repayment to the Homebuyer Assistance Program of an amount of $10,000. That amount is required to be paid back to them, but was allowed to fall to fund balance in a prior fiscal year, so we're just pulling it back out to make that payment.
Is that it? Do I have a motion for approval of all of these budget amendments? Tommy?
Second.
And seconded by Harry. Any public comment? No public comment. We will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. We will now go into our closed session. The executive session under the provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government, Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, Exceptions to Requirement that meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.0712, consult with attorney when the governmental body seeks the advice of its attorney on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter regarding Ford Ranch. With that, we will return as soon as we have completed the discussion on that item. And so we are adjourned for the closed session. Okay? 1 a.m. Sorry I kept you sitting for a few minutes. And with that, Billy, would you like to make an announcement?
Yes, Mayor. I make a motion to authorize the city manager to negotiate and execute a ranch management contract with Forrest Armkey.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Do we vote on this or we just announce it? We vote. Okay, so we got a second. Any public comments? With no public comments, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. We will now move into the follow-up and administrative issues. Consider items discussed, which we just did. Consider approving various board nominations, which is the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Heidi Meyer Brooks, my appointee to a first full term ending December 2021.
Move approval.
Thank you. A second by Lucy. All in public comment, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Are there any announcements and consideration of future agenda items? One thing I would like an update on is Avenue R, or is it R Street off of Chadburn, that big hole that still exists? Like, it's been a big hole for a lot of months. I want to know what's going on. Yes, Harry?
We approved the contract sometime in December, so according to what I've been told, they plan on starting in January sometime.
Well, I need it on an agenda, and I want it presented to the public.
Okay.
Any
so-
other items? Okay.
Move we adjourn.
In a second, by, any public comment and controversy over that item? Absolutely not, so we move to adjourn.